are you listening to? Straight Talk with Kim and Carolyn.
So, bonus episode. What?
Because like this is the angry episode. This is the too many bad things happened today that people need to know about.
Yeah. We really thought that we could combine this discussion with others, and
there's
just no way. There's too much. There's just too much.
Okay,
and so
where do you want to start with?
Oh my gosh.
Okay, we're gonna cover the outrageous behavior of the media right now, exploiting a crime against people's fundamental rights.
That's exactly right.
And we're going to talk about our governor, who has now put a heavy thumb on the scale on the school education choice.
Yes. And I like how it's being covered, and I'll let you move on, apologize, but being covered as a voucher bill. It's not a voucher bill.
And finally, we're going to talk about our junior senator walking on one of the most important votes that we may have right now.
That's right. If you care about the federal vaccine mandates, the people who are being victimized by the federal vaccine mandates, there was an opportunity to defund them due to an amendment by Senator Mike Lee. And there was an article that just came out. The vote was today. The article came out within hours. Yep. And we had 4 Republican senators who just did not show up and lost that vote by one vote.
By one vote. And everybody, all the Republicans were for this. And again, what this bill did, or what his amendment did, was defund the federal government from being able to enforce vaccine mandates.
Yeah.
And we've been covering that a lot on our podcast, and how it really is fundamentally wrong. It's fundamentally unconstitutional. It's a problem that the federal government is reaching back into our state and forcing these things on our people, on our workers.
And think about those are, after SB 2004 passed, there are some healthcare worker mandates that are still in place, and I think the only other ones still in place are these federal mandates, and those impact our military members. They impact our National Guard. Well, that's true. They go into all kinds of industries with, their tentacles reach through from the federal government to contracts.
So Senator Lee had this amendment. Yeah. And it lost by one vote. And one vote. So there are times, and I don't think I always understand it, but sometimes the vote requires 60. And then there's filibuster stuff. And then, but for whatever reason, this particular vote only had a 50-member threshold, and 3 Democrats were gone.
Yeah.
And so, and all the Republicans supported this, but one of our junior senator, Romney, walked on this or was not there.
Was not there. I mean, I'll tell you, as somebody who used to work for Senator Lee, if there was a vote, his job is to vote. That is his job. So I know sometimes people in Utah would say, we haven't seen him. You know what? They're voting all weekend. Yeah. Or they've been held back for whatever reason. That is his job. That is the reason you sent him to Washington, D.C., for whatever reason, and we don't know what the reason is. It wasn't covered at all in that article. But we had our junior senator, along with 3 other Republican senators,
Burr and Graham.
Yes.
Now, I don't know if that tells us anything.
Show up for the vote to defund the federal mandates. So if you are impacted by the federal mandates, we have a problem in our state.
Can I just add that happened in our state legislature when we had the very similar vote to overturn the Salt Lake County brand new forced mask mandates. We had one of our representatives in our county walk on the vote.
It's true.
And it's known that she walked on the vote.
Yeah.
And all day long, that is a worse dereliction of that duty than to vote in a way that you think people might not like or you're going to take heat for. Go take the heat. You raised your hand. You volunteered. You said, I'm prepared, qualified, and competent to do the hard things and make the hard choices. Right. But when it got heated, You took a walk.
Well, and frankly, on this one, I mean,
and you can look at the record and find out who that is.
This one is so violative of our civil liberties.
Yes.
You know, we had this discussion with John Howard. It's violative when it's private business. No one would argue how dangerous this is when it's government.
When the government.
I don't think there's even a debate on that among people who care about the Constitution.
Well, plus we've seen the federal government so much loss of integrity in our institutions, in our federal institutions, and the things,
loss of faith in that.
And the things that we should trust are law enforcement, our courts, our investigative divisions, and things like that have been so abused. And so to have that power coupled with that corruption, that would seek to do this to people.
So let's talk about loss of trust.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think that increasingly there is a greater and greater loss of trust in our journalistic institutions as well, if we want to call them institutions, right?
Given, long gone.
And we saw recently, I mean, it's been dwindling and has become so blatant in recent years. And then to see what we discussed with Chris Knoll, the Salt Lake County GOP chair, and the censure of a member of the SCC who also sits on the Salt Lake Tribune editorial board, for saying that the unvaccinated ought to be, I don't know, kept in their homes.
She called on the military.
Kept from free society by the National Guard, right?
Right.
It was the National Guard, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a while ago.
The military should be used against law-abiding citizens of the state of Utah who are expressing a different will for their health.
Yeah, who are not undergoing a prescribed medical procedure. I mean, that's just unreal to me.
Unapproved, by the way, FDA unapproved. So this horrific thing happened today, and I don't know how I missed it over the last couple of days, but there is a donation platform that, there's several of them out there, but this donation platform, someone criminally hacked in and took donor information.
And hold on, let's be clear too, right? We had GoFundMe, who seized $8 million of the truckers' money. I think they gave $1 million, right? And held on to the remaining money and had initially made a decision, we're going to distribute this as we see fit. Ended up getting so much pushback that they said, okay, we will refund it.
Okay, so we're talking about the truckers.
The truckers in Canada.
We're talking about the Canadian trucker Freedom Convoy.
Yeah. But so that happens. So we have another fundraiser platform that has been willing in the past. It's a Christian platform, has been willing in the past to hold fundraisers for those that are refused on some of the other woke platforms. Right. And anyway, so they go over to Give, Send, Go. No one hacked into GoFundMe. Apparently their acquiescence was enough. So they weren't hacked into. And now we have an illegal hacking. But this keeps happening. Didn't it happen with the representation, the defense for Kyle Rittenhouse? Yeah. Wasn't that also hacked into? So
it just seems like the right side of things is the victim of hacking.
And I could be wrong on that. I know that GoFundMe walked away from that one. But I am pretty sure there was hacking, and I know there was on a number of other conservative fundraisers. These always seem to be broken into and leaked through the media, who were complicit, frankly, in sharing that information.
Okay, so let's talk about why this particular crime, though, is so bad.
Yeah.
Donor privacy is enshrined in the First Amendment, and the courts have recognized that. And why is that important? So we have long histories and examples of people can be victims of retaliation because of what they support through donations, which is their fundamental free speech right, especially political speech. And so that is protected. That is, you don't have to disclose that. Now, elections you do. There are elections laws that if you donate, a certain amounts of money, then you do have to disclose.
Yeah. But let's be clear and let's remind our viewers that we have a Democrat state senator who donated money. It seems he donated money to a cause where there was vandalism on public property with red paint.
He donated to the vandalism.
He donated to the paint for the vandalism. And he's still serving in the state Senate.
And I think he donated. I think the donation was completed the day after the paint was purchased. And it's in the notation that the donation was for paint.
For paint.
For red paint.
Yeah, that was notated on the check itself, right?
Well, did he write another check, for like cleaning up of the paint?
Of course he did.
No, our taxpayer dollars.
Oh,
that's
okay.
that's what our money was used for.
All right.
Our money was used for
there
that.
was no censure,
No.
was there?
Well, nothing public that I recall. I remember
But he wasn't
being
removed,
shot.
and he
was not
wasn't
removed.
charged, and he was not. I don't believe he went before the ethics committee, which the legislature does have an ethics process.
And I don't remember any Tribune reporters calling and harassing him about it either.
So that
you mean the Salt Lake County District Attorney didn't press charges against him?
Yeah, it's kind of funny how that works.
Huh.
Yeah, when it was the DA's building, and remember, because it was their building, they removed themselves from the prosecution, turned it over to someone else who went. I will say, if I remember correctly, the DA was actually pretty hard on them initially because, well, I don't know why. But it was
there were larger
the
charges
building.
And
then they pulled back on a lot of those charges once it was turned over to another prosecuting entity.
So here's the real problem. So donor privacy has been violated, and now it is disclosed. It's now open that some of these donors that were donating little funds to the Canadian Ottawa Trucker Freedom Convoy, whatever it is, which is their right to do it, and it's their right to maintain that privacy.
Yeah.
But when it got hacked and when it got into the open, we have reporters in Utah that are now going after those donors, wanting them to answer for their donation, wanting to know why they chose that.
Yeah.
And
they're just writing a story. They're just writing a story.
So
I'm sure.
That is an absolute shameful act of these reporters.
Yeah.
Well, I shouldn't say reporters. I just know Bryan Schott is doing that. But tell me where else, if some sensitive and private list was hacked and came out into the open that and I mean a constitutional private list. I'm not talking about like Ashley Madison private list that came out. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about lists of activities that are constitutionally protected, that are private, that you would ever have the media go exploit that crime, that now these are crime victims, so to speak, the people whose donor privacy, they are crime victims. Yeah. They are now at risk. They can possibly be subject to retaliation if their employer doesn't agree with them.
Right.
In their neighborhoods, maybe in their social circles. Maybe even if you look back at what happened to Governor Scott Walker years ago when his supporters were disclosed, there were raids around the city before dawn where families experienced battering rams knocking down their doors, guns, rifles open and terrorizing these families, and they thought they were being attacked. They didn't know it was a law enforcement activity. So we've seen real examples where people are actually at other kinds of actual physical risk of harm. And so instead of the reporter respecting that, they're going after wanting to know ask why you exercise your free speech, your protected free speech, but it's exploiting that these are victims of crimes already.
That's right.
And now they're going to layer on top of it this level of of activity. Shame on him. I mean, shame on him.
Well, and I don't think that I have any question that this is an attempt by some to make us a little fearful.
Well, it is an intimidation factor. I mean, it is because now donors may question if
whether
next time they
give.
donate, will they be revealed? And
I regret not donating to the trucker convoy. I would appreciate and enjoy that phone conversation.
Maybe we need to go deliver sandwiches too. That's good. But I got a call from a good friend today that said that he had been contacted by media, and then Fosmu, you have someone who, and not the same person. So we know that there is, there are multiple.
I got contacted just as we sat down.
Yeah.
To record tonight.
Yeah, wondering what the reasons were, right. for donating, and I'm sure that this report won't say anything like crazy right-wing extremist lunatics, which are the words that are always the precursors to anybody who's not far left.
Far right.
Any story
when
that
he writes an article.
Exactly. And any story that a respectable journalist would write right now would be on the hacking itself, the crime, the potential for harm that these people are now exposed to. Yeah. But instead, he wants to make the story about why are you, why did you do this? Why did you exercise
your free speech?
And you know what this tells us is there is no journalism ethics anymore.
No. And I think I've talked about this before. I subscribed to the Tribune for 15 years, probably, about that. And one day they hired somebody who, after reading him for a few months, I just couldn't do it anymore. And I said, I can't pay for this anymore. I can't support this. I canceled. And recently, because of my work, I resubscribed. And I just, it kills me. It kills me that I have to support this type of yellow journalism. Yeah.
So that's another reason for people to come to us and come to Straight Talk and get some additional news here. But the other crazy, infuriating thing that happened today was we've had Representative Candace Perucci on the podcast previously with her legislation for education choice. That once again, let's just remind people that 70% of Utahns support this nationally. No, I'm sorry. 77% support of parents with school-age children. 76% of Utahns.
I think it was
support
69.
This. So that was a different survey. That was the Dan Jones survey. But Ed Choice is an organization who does real time in the field work testing how people support this. And Ed Choice watched support for this over the last 2 years, just sort of
nationwide, like throughout the states.
But in Utah especially, it's never been higher support for education choice. And now what did our governor, supports school choice, but
he wants to pay teachers more and says that he will until he's paying teachers more. These are my words, not his. Isn't willing to adequately support students in the school until teachers make more, or isn't willing to give students and their families the choices that they need, which I find very rich, coming from an individual when he was handed a mansion by us, the taxpayers, to live in, and made the decision that wasn't good enough for him. He wanted to live in his family home with his family. And so needed taxpayer dollars in the amount of greater than $600,000 for security and additional buildings on his private property with taxpayer money. But if the education, which is guaranteed and promised to you, a home is not, even if you're governor, the education that is guaranteed and promised to you, if it is utterly failing your children, we're looking after the teachers for now, so hold off. Don't worry. You can wait a few years or decades. You just kind of have to suck it up. The taxpayers are not going to pay for that for you when what we've handed you isn't good enough. But if what I'm handed isn't good enough, bring it on.
I remember when we were talking about this with Representative Perucci, it wasn't an either-or situation.
Right.
It wasn't like either, we get the Hope Scholarship, or we fund teachers.
Yeah. Well, and can I say
in fact, she's ensured that they do kind of grow together. But I mean, the number you said, so the governor came out and said he wants to see teachers making $60,000 a year. Which
I want to see kids learning to read and do math. Like, that is my interest in education.
But let's talk about that number. Yeah. And for wherever you are on the income spectrum.
And I don't want my kids indoctrinated. Go on.
Whatever you think $60,000 is.
Yeah.
For a 3/4 year job, that is 3 times the median Utah income.
Yeah.
Which is not the focus of his thing or our thing. But he's waiting. He's going to deny families choice until
he gets what he wants.
Till the legislature pays teachers 3 times the median wage of Utah.
Yeah.
The median salaries in Utah.
Yeah, the focus for so long has been on, and we love and appreciate our good teachers, right? Like, I don't even know why we have to say that. To me, that's a given, but we'll say it because there's some confusion sometimes. Yes, we love and appreciate our good teachers, but that isn't what we're talking about right here. That's a different issue. And I'm telling you, I listened to President Adams on Rod Arquette, and he talking about this very issue when Rod asked him. And he made the point that if you're giving a family $5,000 for that child, but the WPU for that child is $10,000, you are shrinking the class sizes. If this happens to a large degree, you're shrinking the class sizes. You are reducing maybe the number of teachers that you need, depending on what it looks like in the end. And you're keeping 50% of the money in the system while you do that.
So, but you know what? That's math, Carolyn. And
I wouldn't expect
we can't do math.
Governor, teachers, math. I don't know.
Yeah, and some legislators. Let's talk about the effect, though, of the governor putting his thumb on the scale. Yeah. Because I experienced that with him when I was in the legislature. Only it wasn't as public. He was, he was more backroom, and telling us I'll tell you, sent me a note and said, if you do not run your bill this way, then I'm going to veto it. And I'm like, excuse me? You're the guy downstairs in the other office.
Yeah. You're that other branch.
You're the other branch. Yeah. And, but no, he made it very clear, this is the legislation I want to see, or I'll veto it, and I just want to say, then veto it,
Well, that's
I'll run my
veto
bill.
It.
You veto it, because that's your job. But apparently, you ran for the wrong office, and you really prefer being a legislator these days.
No, he doesn't want to legislate. This is about controlling the entire process and the legislature, not being one of many. Like, what's the glory in that?
So here's what happens that he did that. He put the thumb on the scale. Yeah. So now there's a dynamic that's shifted. Yeah. Or can potentially shift. So let me be clear. I don't know what the legislature is going to do. But here's what could potentially happen, and I've seen this happen when I was up there, is now the legislature, the caucus, the Republicans of the House may now go into a room, close the door, and say, do we have 50? Yep. Are there 50 votes? Because he's going to veto it. So now there are going to be some conversations about, potentially, well, should we even have a vote and a long debate and more news stories and 1,000 more emails a day if it's just going to be vetoed anyway? Yeah. And so sometimes there are those conversations, and they may take a vote. And if it's close to 50, they'll say, okay, maybe let's just go ahead and run it. But I can hear some speeches, some rote, tired speeches that go along the lines of, well, but what about so-and-so and so-and-so? It's an election year. Yep. They're in a swing district. And, if they vote yes, they'll be in trouble. If they vote no, they'll be in trouble. So if we're going to get vetoed anyway,
let's not
why even put them on the record? And I can hear that conversation. I can hear it in my head because it happened enough. Yeah. Not frequently, but it happened enough on key things. And so that's what happens when the governor signals that is then it gives cover, I think, or it allows some legislators who don't want to be on the record to stay off the record.
Yeah. Well, and can I tell you, I actually had somebody pull me aside today and say it's getting really bad, the level of influence that the governor and his people are attempting to kind of push onto the legislature. And I said, well, is it worse than last year? I heard this was going on last year. And it is apparently, according to a handful of these legislators that I know of, feel like it's significantly worse. And actually, I think you'd never guess who I've spoken to because it's not people I necessarily would always see eye to eye with on everything. But there are some concerns that there's a little bit of some difficulty staying in the right lane.
So now that is the governor. I mean, the governor's prerogative is that he's got a pulpit. He's got the pulpit,
Yep.
and he can have his agendas and he can broadcast signal whatever he wants, and he can say, "Yeah, I don't like that legislation.
Yep.
I was also elected by the people, and I'm going to oppose that." And and we understand that is part of that checks and balances, that he can exercise that veto pen, that that he can sign, that he can not sign and have things go. But I didn't see this in a former time. That I think that to one thing to say, here's my position, but it's another thing to start having staff, and your surrogates walk the hallways and send the messages and say, go this way,
Yes.
do this, don't do that.
Yes.
And maybe technically they can, maybe legally they can. It is their
you can
prerogative.
have those conversations.
It's just, I feel like it's disrespectful of the process. Your
Correct.
job is to choose in the end.
Yep.
Veto, not veto. You can also say from your pulpit, I like these policies, don't like these policies. It's another thing when you start getting into the lane and
saying do this and don't do this. And also, it seems as though maybe there's not such straight talk when they are approached and kind of, I don't want to say confronted, but asked, have you been working against this bill? Oh, no, not been happening. When people know it has. So.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, my experience was that denial that the conversations with me had happened. But it's an interesting world when,
yes,
when
it is.
People overheard it. And
yes.
now there was a very awkward position where...
I've heard that story.
Yeah. I think everybody's heard that story by now. It really burst a bubble for me.
Yeah.
Really changed my regard.
Well, you lose respect.
Yeah.
So, a lot going on. A lot will continue going on. Thanks for joining us again tonight on Straight Talk for Kim and Carolyn, with Kim and Carolyn.
And follow us, subscribe to us, and not the Tribune. because honestly, the Tribune is now sunk to the lowest depth that I even imagine they could go, to exploit crime victims, to do this. So anyway, ditch your news source. Come here. We're also we're building a larger platform where we're going to provide some of that news aggregation. So really, this Straight Talk with Kim and Carolyn can be a one-stop shop for your news. But definitely come here for Straight Talk.
Yes, great to see you.